It's Freiburger here, and I am off on a road trip in my old Chevy truck to find abandoned racetracks, ghost towns, and Americana. Plus, I'm gonna show you a great Rick Payway Jeep and give you more fun hot rodding history than you knew you needed to know. Let's kick off this shindig. My plan here is to drive my '69 Chevy C20 from SoCal to Arizona to visit a very historic drag strip that is likely to become houses pretty soon, and I gotta see it before it's gone. And I'm starting here at the Rose Bowl. I know you know this place from football games and stuff, but there's hot rodding history here. First of all, this place was built in 1922, probably longer ago than you thought. But then in 1947, they had car races here. They built a board track inside the stadium and they raced midgets. Another thing that happened here in 1947 is that the Pasadena Roadster Club, which was a club of hot rods, and they had been organizing dry lakes racing, well, they had the very first event called the Pasadena Roadster Club Reliability Run. And this was a step towards making hot rods more sort of street friendly and friendly to the officers in the neighborhood, because remember, hot rod was a bad word back then. The other thing that happened here at the Rose Bowl was in 1957, this is where go-kart racing was born. In 1956, Art Ingalls was working at Curtis Craft building Indy cars and midgets and created the first go-kart at home. Very quickly, a bunch of other hot rodders built karts. They had impromptu races right here at the Rose Bowl. They got magazine coverage and karting took off into a huge trend. And now I am off, headed east to go to Arizona to see this historic track. As I split from the Rose Bowl here, I was thinking about what I was talking to you about a minute ago, and I realized the whole deal with board track racing inside the Rose Bowl, I said it was 1947. There is some evidence that that happened as early as 1945, so immediately after the war. Also, on the topic of the go-kart racing that went on there, it happened in that parking lot. I realized I might have sounded like it happened inside the Rose Bowl. It was actually in the parking lot. And also, Rod and Custom magazine was heavily involved in the early days of go-karting and in covering go-karting a lot over a period of years. And one of the guys who was there for those early races was Lynn Wineland, who was the second editor of Rod and Custom. And he was also an artist, and he designed the logo for the go-karts, for Go-Kart Manufacturing Company, which was founded by that guy Duffy Livingston, and he also made the world's very first go-kart racetrack. That was in Azusa, California, and he also had a manufacturing company, made parts and go-karts, and is considered sort of the grandfather of the whole thing. Obviously, Art Ingalls was the first guy, but Duffy really made it happen. And so, Rod and Custom, I was actually the editor there from 1999 to 2000 or 2001, something like that. So I feel a little bit of a connection to the origins there, the parking lot of the Rose Bowl. Well, that didn't take long. I stopped right down the street from the Rose Bowl, Pasadena, California, for a Freiburger Cafe review. The Rain, my favorite place here in Pasadena. It's really good. You gotta try the grits. They have just the right tooth to them. And I don't know how they make scrambled eggs better than anybody else, but they do. All right, enough of me getting fat. Let's keep going. Oh, you know what? The banana bread in that joint also absolutely rules. You get it instead of toast. Oh, smoking a little bit. Oh, I guess I should tell you about the truck that I'm driving here. This is my '69 Chevy C20, meaning two-wheel drive, 3/4 ton. I got this truck in a prior episode that you really need to see. It was a great road trip when I went to Las Vegas to get it. And I only paid $5,000 for this thing. The dude, Phil Safford, who sold it to me, was ultra cool for giving me that deal on this truck. And it's been bulletproof. It's been a very regular daily driver in my household. It has got a bone stock 350 in it and turbo 400 transmission, automatic. It's virtually mint, showroom condition. Actually closer to actual mint than most of the things that I call mint. So yeah, I love this truck. Right now I'm passing the Miller Brewery in Irwindale, California, and the old Irwindale Dragstrip was right there, immediately underneath that place. And I think the brewery is now shut down too. I did some research when I got home. The brewery sold in 2020, and I can't tell what's happening there now, but here is the Irwindale Dragstrip in 1968. It was active from 1965 to 1977. Now, in the photo, I noticed this little road race track across the street. And yes, it's Duffy Livingston's Go-kart raceway that I told you about when I was leaving the Rose Bowl. It's a little 0.4 of a mile track. Man, it must have been great times back then. Drag strip on one side of the street, go-kart track on the other. But then the city bought the drag strip land and gave it to Miller. Well, you can't argue beer, I guess. Okay, back to the drive. Now I'm at the site of Fontana Drag City in Fontana, California. The interesting thing about this is no matter where you go online to research the history of this place, it says that it operated from 1955 to 1972. But here's what I've discovered. At newspapers.com, you can search every newspaper ever printed, it seems. And I found a story about this place being permitted in May of 1960 and opening in September or October, end of September, early October of 1960. So I believe that it operated from 1960 to 1972. And initially it was called Fontana Raceway. And interestingly enough, you don't find a mention of the famous name Fontana Drag City until 1964. And by the way, the Jan and Dean song Drag City came out in 1963. So I am estimating they may have renamed this track to capitalize on the popularity of that song. The place opens as Fontana Raceway in 1960. There's evidence that Mickey Thompson was a player, but his name wasn't out there and he didn't run the place. In January of 1964, Jan and Dean's song Drag City makes the top 10. Both the album and the single covers were shot at San Fernando Raceway. In June of 1964, newspapers announced Mickey Thompson's Fontana International Dragway as if it was a new thing. It was also referred to in newspapers as Mickey Thompson's Fontana Raceway, probably erroneously. But you can see that Mickey Thompson's name was actually painted on the tower. By December of 1964, newspapers are sometimes calling the track Fontana Drag City, and as you can see here, that stuck until at least November of 1965 at Mickey Thompson's first 200-mile-an-hour invitational meet. Look for a film called A Gathering of Monsters here on YouTube to see that event in action. It's worth it. The second annual Mickey Thompson 200-mile-an-hour meet was held at Lyons in 1966, by which time Fontana had threatened going out of business until promoter Ben Criss took over, calling it Fontana Drag Raceway. Finally, in this ad in the December 11th, 1972 Los Angeles Times, you can see that the place was offered for lease with an owner called Mr. Campbell and describing the track as Drag City. Apparently, he found no one and the track closed. Oh, but wait, I went home and dug up more research. Here's an aerial view of the track in 1966. And by way of comparison, here's the location in June of 1959. There's no track there. So my hunch that the 1955 opening date is bogus is confirmed. There was no track here and no airstrip until 1960. I'm out of here. This is Desert Center, California, and I have to tell you, it is very weird for me to be old enough to remember this being an actual, not thriving community, but solid. and now it's complete desolation. Back in the 90s, when I was the editor of Four Wheel and Off-Road magazine, we executed this thing that was called the 4x4 of the Year test, and I remember filling up all of those brand new trucks at that gas station right there. We did it, I don't know, 3 or 4 years in a row we came through here to fill up there. And the cafe over here, I gotta tell a story. Strangely, I never drank coffee in my life until, I don't know, 6 months ago. Strangely enough, I just started. I don't get it. But I was coming through here with Rick Payway, and I couldn't tell you what year it is. Maybe it was in the 90s, early 2000s. And he told me that that cafe had the best coffee in the world. And so the very first time coffee ever crossed my lips was sitting in that cafe right there. I probably paid for it at that counter that is just all busted up sitting in the window there. I know I didn't drink it at the food counter, but maybe at that table that's right up at the front. Further down, there's a gas station that I don't even go to anymore because it's so depressing. It's so covered in graffiti. But I knew a guy who worked there as a teenager. And speaking of the graffiti, I remember this whole place when it didn't have a speck of graffiti, even after it was abandoned. At the Desert Center Cafe, there used to be a cool old neon sign, and that's all gone. I hope the neat stuff here ended up in someone's hands who's gonna take care of it, because man, the town is desolate. The market, the roof completely fell in on that deal. I remember buying stuff there too. I remember going in to get like an ice cream bar and stuff. Even when I was a little kid, when my parents would take me on road trips, we would stop here for gas. So I actually remember Desert Center back into the 70s. And now every time I come here, I think probably it's just gonna dry up and blow away. So that's the story of Desert Center. It's dark now. In fact, sunglasses. Probably late for the night. My plan is to cannonball into Arizona. I think I can make it. 9 miles per gallon, 56-year-old truck. What could go wrong? Good morning. I made it to Arizona last night, and it's already a refreshing 100 degrees outside, so I'm working in the shade while I can. I thought I'd have a look at how much oil this thing drank yesterday. Here it comes. Dip it in, pull it out. Survey says, about a quart. Yeah, about a quart. Needs oil. This engine started to smoke, and I don't know. I'm concerned about it. It runs good. Oh, it got 13 miles to the gallon yesterday. That shocked me. I thought it would be way worse than that. So it's healthy, but it's starting to burn oil. And keep in mind that mileage and that oil burning is from driving the thing with either 410 or 456 gears, I don't know, at 60 to 65, sometimes 70 miles an hour. So it's a lot of RPM. It's probably starting to take its toll. All right, so I'm gonna get some oil, and today's the day where I get to really geek out. I'm gonna show you really one of the most important drag strips that I've been to. Let's go. Now I am in Goodyear, Arizona, which, as you may surmise, is named for the Goodyear Tire and Rubber Company. I assumed they made tires here. That's actually not the case as far as I can tell, with the exception of some tank track tires during World War II. No, in 1916, an executive named Litchfield bought a whole bunch of acreage here, and by 1917, Goodyear was growing cotton in order to make the cords for tires. So that's why they bought this place. Apparently it was outdated by the time the 20s rolled around. They were making tire cords out of different stuff. And then they turned it into Goodyear Farms. They had a massive farming operation here. And then World War II came around and made a big change in operations here. The federal government was paying Goodyear to build stuff for them, like they did with so many different manufacturers. And so they built buildings, and Goodyear was making stuff like the flight decks for PBY aircraft. They made their own Corsair airplanes. They made the tank tracks that I talked about. I found some indications that they may have made prefab buildings, on and on, all sorts of stuff for World War II. And then, of course, even though the government had paid to build the buildings for them, Goodyear then bought them at pennies on the dollar after World War II, and Goodyear Aircraft was born. I can't tell if this is factual or not because I've got conflicting reports, but I think that in 1955 they started building the enclosure, the skin for Goodyear blimps right here, which would make sense because I do have a lot of reports that they were manufacturing the balloons that were used for the Macy's Thanksgiving Day Parade, like the giant inflatable characters. And so it makes sense if they could make that, they could also make blimps. Now, I'm gonna tie my episode all back together for you. Remember I kicked this off at the Rose Bowl in Pasadena, California? Well, as you may know, the Rose Bowl game is attached to the Rose Parade that happens every New Year's Eve. Well, the Goodyear blimp in 1955 was the very first in-flight vehicle to do a live television broadcast. So yeah, 1955, they had aerial shots of the Rose Parade from the Goodyear blimp. Now here's the other thing I think they may have built here. I'm not positive, but I want to tell you about it, so I'm going to assume that it's true. The Goodyear inflate-a-plane. Have you ever heard of that deal? It's exactly what it sounds like, an inflatable airplane. They wanted to build them so that they could drop them in for combat troops that were behind enemy lines, or they were just trapped or stranded. They would drop them this plane and they would literally inflate it and leave. It was a real thing. I hope they actually made them here. I want to believe that. Anyway, 1955 is also when this major drag race happened that I'm going to tell you about next. But first, I am going to follow the path of pioneers as I find the starting point on my journey to this abandoned drag strip. Now I am inside the property where the Goodyear plant was. And I think there's a lot of original buildings here. In fact, most of them. The one big giant hangar here that is now being used as a parking lot is, I believe, where they built blimps. I did get confirmation they built actual blimps here. Not only Navy type blimps, but also Goodyear blimps. Not all of them, but some of them. So that's really cool. You know, when I was driving around and shot the video of that Corsair mural, I ran into a lady who asked, "What are you doing?" And I sort of said, "Hey, I'm into the history of this." And she just volunteered, "Yeah, you know, my uncle, my grandfather, my grandmother, they all worked over there at Goodyear." And she said, "My grandmother was one of them that made the Macy's Thanksgiving Day Parade inflatables." So that was pretty cool that she told me that entirely unprompted. Ooh, what is this kind of equipment over here? This is a huge and cool Ingersoll Rand 2-stage compressor with a General Electric 350 horsepower electric motor. The Worthington unit you should know, because Worthington is a massive industrial company that merged with Studebaker in 1967 and therefore was also the same company as STP and Paxton Superchargers for a while. So much cool old stuff. And of course, this whole area is attached to an airfield. It's an airport. It was originally the Navy Air Facility Litchfield Park, named for Paul Litchfield, who was the Goodyear exec who brought all of this stuff here. The street out front's also named for him, Litchfield. So it was Litchfield Park and then Goodyear Airfield or Airport, and now it is Phoenix Goodyear Airport. Okay, it's time for me to get going, and here's the reason why I came here to go to this drag strip, which is that in all of the old advertisements to get people to come out to the drag strip, they said, how many miles it is from Litchfield Park. Sometimes they said 6, sometimes they said 9, but they just said head west from Litchfield Park 6 miles and you'll find it, or head west 9 miles and you'll find it. So that's what I'm gonna do. I am gonna trace the route of our original hot rodding pioneers. All right, let me give you some background about why I care about this drag strip so much. And I'm gonna go back to 1949 when Wally Parks became the editor of Hot Rod magazine. And in 1951, from the offices of Hot Rod, he invented or founded the National Hot Rod Association, the NHRA, which is still professional drag racing, and I work for them on the side to this day. So Wally created NHRA in 1951, had his first drag race in 1953, and by 1954 clearly decided that he wanted to be the sanctioning body for all of drag racing, because there were some others on the East Coast that were competing as drag racing operations. And so Wally sent out a team that was called the Drag Safari to go throughout the country and to teach hot rod clubs how to hold a drag race according to the NHRA. And that safari was Bud Coons, who is the Pomona motorcycle officer who really got the Pomona drag strip going, as well as others. Bud Coons, Bud Evans, then it was Chick Cannon, who just passed away, and Eric Rickman, who was the photographer from Hot Rod magazine. So in 1954 and 1955, they did this massive tour with a Plymouth station wagon hauling a little trailer. I can't even imagine the times that these guys had out on the road. I mean, I heard a little bit of it from Rickman. I unfortunately didn't know the other guys, but Rickman had some good stories. Anyway, in 1955, Wally decided that he wanted to have drag racing's first, what he considered truly national event. And so he set up the NHRA Nationals in Great Bend, Kansas. And there was a big race there. It was fantastic. It was the center of the country, so everybody could come from all over. But then it rained out on Sunday. Or perhaps it was Saturday, I don't remember. But the finals were a rain out. And so months later, in November of 1955, they ended up holding the finals right here in Goodyear, Arizona. Actually in a little division known as Perryville. And that brings us to this drag strip that we're gonna see right now. And I'll tell you a little bit more about it when we get there. I made it to the hollowed ground, but then the truck vapor locked, so we'll just let that cool off for a minute while I'm giving you this background information. Yes, this is the exact plot of land right here where that historic very first NHRA national event in 1955 had its finals. So this is kind of a big deal, but the history actually dates before 1955. In World War II, right down the street was Luke Army Airfield, and this was one of the auxiliary fields. It was auxiliary field number 6. After the war, as happened all over the country, the hot rodders saw the plot of land and they decided they needed to use it for drag racing, and they got permission, and they were out here with the Southwest Timing Association organizing it by at least 1954. Could be 1953, but definitely 1954. And they kept on racing until really 1957. You can hear a plane right now taking off from Luke. They continued racing here through the 1957 series, and then in 1958, strangely, in early March, an airplane dropped a wing tank directly on this runway and put a big pockmark in it. Now, presumably the hot rodders fixed that because they were still planning to race. Maybe they didn't, maybe they just moved the track over. But regardless, end of March 1958, the commander over at Luke said ixnay. He did not allow the hot rodders to race anymore. He claimed that they had broken their trust and weren't cleaning the place up like they said that they were going to. And so that's how it all happened. That's how it all ended right here. But it wasn't the end of drag racing around Phoenix. There were tons of tracks around here, at least as many as we had around Los Angeles. It was a hotbed. And after they got tossed out here, they actually went to another airfield that I'm gonna go visit next. But first, I have to tell you about the dramatic ending of that very first NHRA Nationals. So the two racers in the final eliminator were Calvin Rice, and Fritz Voigt. Now, Fritz would go on to become Mickey Thompson's right-hand man and was well known because he helped him out with the Challenger 1 for that 406-mile-an-hour run that Mickey made at the Bonneville Salt Flats in 1960, turning him into an American hero. But at the time, Fritz was just a hot rodder, and he was out here racing Cal Rice. Now, back then, they only had a flagman for starts, and so they line them up side by side. I like to imagine at that line on the ground right there, and the flagman sends them off, but one of them jumps. Back then, that wasn't a red light. They just ran the race again. So they line them up again, flagman, another one of them jumps. Supposedly the different guy. Third time, they both jump. And so as soon as they both jump, the race had been declared. The starter said that it was good, but then Cal Rice's transmission blows up. And so Fritz assumes that he's won, but no, the starter says that was an official race. Cal Rice is on the clock for half an hour, and they just completely dogpiled the car, got a new transmission in the thing, came back to the line for the fourth attempt, and Cal Rice beat Fritz Voigt. And that was the ending of the very first NHRA Nationals. Now I'm gonna sit here and let the truck cool off indefinitely, and then take you over to another airfield with even more stories, but briefer ones, I have to admit, briefer. More brief? Shorter ones. Pithy, more pithy. I can stand here as a human thesaurus and wait for my truck to cool off, wait for it to chill, wait for it to cool. While I'm sitting around waiting here, I'm just gonna run you through some headlines and newspaper stories that I found about this place from back in the day. I think they're really cool. Check it out. First, here's a now versus then shot. Right now, my truck is sitting here on the runway healing itself, and it's in nearly the same spot where in 1955, Art and Lloyd Chrisman had their dragster. This number 25 car was the very first car down track on the first day of the Nationals at Great Bend, Kansas. Here's the earliest newspaper photo layout I found about Perryville from February 1955. The track was open on the first Sunday of each month. In April 55, this Cadillac-powered T-Bucket got some ink. This story from May of 1955 claims that the racing at Perryville started in January of 1954. Check this out from the social pages. These kids are having a good time. By November 55, the newspapers really started amping up the NHRA coming to town. Here are Bud Evans and Bud Coons with the huge trophy. If you've never before seen Lloyd Scott's Bustle Bomb, it has an Olds Rocket V8 in the front and a Cadillac in the rear. They both drive the same rear axle. It's modified with two pinion gears, one coming in the front, one in the back. The thing is said to be the very first car over 150 miles an hour in the quarter. And at the beginning of the NHRA Nationals in Great Bend, it ran an ET of 944. The Perryville meet was both an Arizona regional as well as the finals for the Nationals, but cars came from all over the country. These are the Bean Bandits out of San Diego. Finally, here's the coverage as it appeared in Hot Rod magazine in the February 1956 issue. It was a really big deal to be featured in Hot Rod. On November 20th, 1955, the local press was also on top of it. And here's coverage of the Arizona State Championships the following year, 1956. Finally, here's an ad for one of the last races of 1957, before the track closed down in March of 58. Now I can say I spent a bunch of time at Perryville before it became houses. You look in the aerials, you'll see there's development all around here. I'm sure it'll be gone someday. But now we're gonna find out if the truck will fire up and get me to the next one. Watch it smoke. The carburetor is still blazing hot. Not as bad as it has been. Well, here I am. It's another abandoned drag strip. Can't you tell? There's really nothing left here but a berm that I'm standing on. If you look at the aerial photography, you can see a lot more of the remnants of this auxiliary airfield than you can from the ground. This was Luke Auxiliary number 3. Apparently in the military, this field was also called Fighter Field, and it's the standard configuration of an auxiliary airfield. Today, the Surprise, Arizona City Hall sits right in the middle of it. As soon as the Southwest Timing Association was thrown out of Perryville, they got permission to use this field because the military had deeded it to the city, so the general was no longer a problem. In May of 1958, it launched as Phoenix Dragstrip. 6 months later, in November of 58, it was revealed that the Marauders Car Club would operate the place. And by January of 59, they repaved the place with guidance from a guy called Jim Salette. He was reported to be an advisor or a sponsor. But then a couple weeks later, it's revealed that Jim Salette is taking over operations of the track, and it's renamed Phoenix Associated Dragstrip. 5 months later, in May of 1959, Salette quits. He says drag racing is too dangerous. It's later revealed that the NHRA was going to pull his insurance, and so he was out of there either way. The Marauders ended up taking back track operations. Local press called it the beleaguered track. By May of 1960, circle track racing hero Mel Larson becomes the promoter, and the track becomes called Mel Larson's Phoenix Dragstrip. Soon enough, he has NHRA sanctioning, and the place runs through 1962. All right, I gotta get out of here. It is evening, and I need to go find more cool stuff. Chevy truck is good. Well, it's very late dusk, but I made it here. That is what I knew as Speed World. It closed in 2011. I have actually raced here, but it opened in 1963, and this has been called a bunch of places. I think Arizona Raceway, Phoenix Dragway. I saw somewhere Sports World, Speed World, and it's a really sad deal because it was a big motorsports complex, had a fantastic drag strip, and the government, city, I don't know who owned it, finally just said, no, we're taking the land back, and it sits completely abandoned and vacant. It's sad. I really want to go in there because I remember that tower. I remember being able to hang out on like the patio up at the top there. I remember announcing from the glass up there at the top. I'd like to see it again, but this is all I'm going to see, and it's going to continue to rot into the desert ground. Remember, Mel Larson was the promoter down at that track that was in Surprise, Arizona, but since 1960, there was news that he was trying to spearhead a big multiplex, a racetrack facility that would include anything up to and including a lake for boats. Well, in 1963, Arizona Raceways became a reality, beginning with a drag strip, but it was sanctioned by the AHRA, which is unusual because Larson's previous track was NHRA. At the very first major race in February of 1963, Rod Stuckey set records with Chris Karamessinas' top fuel car, the Golden Greek. But sadly, Greek's partner Don Maynard was killed in an auto accident on the way there. By 1964 or early 1965, the track became known as Sportsland Dragway, and it was back under NHRA sanction. And then in 1969, it was back with the AHRA and renamed Mel Larson's Phoenix Dragway. In 1984-ish, the name became Phoenix Raceway Park. I think it became Speed World in the late 90s, and racing stopped in 2011. And that's it. It is dark, and I have no idea where I'm going. You will find out at approximately the same time that I do. It's morning, and here I am still in Arizona. Perhaps, if you're a pretty close follower, you can guess where I'm going right now. I think you're gonna like it. Yes, it is the Freiburger collection at the Museum of Pinway. This is Rick Pinway's house. He's not here right now, but I've got some work to do. This is my 1972 F100. That is my 1967 Wagoneer. And that is my 1971 Jeepster Commando. But the job today is the truck. Let's get into it. I am now in the glorious shade of my 72 F100. You'll remember this from a prior episode on the channel. I was able to buy this thing from the widower of a lady who passed away, and she was a huge 4x4 fan and had a bunch of cool stuff, including this truck. So it's a 72 F100, but it's got a F250 Dana 60 in the back, and in the front, the Dana 44 has got 3/4 ton outers, so it's 8 lug. So it's a coil spring truck with 3/4 ton axles. It's got a 390, it's got a 4-speed, it's really good. And you got to see the episode because Rick and I completely butchered together this 390 valve train to make it work. It was actually great. But today, I am pulling the drive shafts out of it because they are both completely trashed to the point where you can't really even use the thing. So I'm going to grab them and take them back to LA and rebuild them, and then I'll bring them back next time I'm ready to work on this, which you will undoubtedly see on the channel. Okay, let's remove this thing. And got them. Wow, these things are trashed. The center carrier bearing's all loose. The slip-in splines are all garbage. The U-joints were shot. The magic of getting this thing out was that I found some rust penetrant in one of my other vehicles. And that made me think, maybe there's oil in there that I can put in the Chevy because it no doubt needs that by now. So now I have to figure out how to keep these from rolling around in the Chevy. I'll probably tape them together. And then, I don't know, find your next adventure. Oh, I know, there's something here I want to show you. So let me strap these in, get some oil, and then show you treasures. I didn't find any actual oil over there in my other cars. I did find some Lucas zinc snot, and I am happy with that. And I'm even happier that I just checked the oil in the truck and it doesn't even need oil. That's pretty great. I don't think I did as many miles yesterday as I did on day one. I'm gonna just throw this in the cab corner behind the seat so that it breaks open and then leaks everywhere and then prevents rust right there. Okay, let me show you something. Man, this is gonna be good. This is what Rick and I call the race Jeep, and it's pretty special, and I'll show you why. It's got so much cool stuff on it. First of all, it is a M38, a Willys M38, which is the Army version of a Jeep flat fender. And you can tell that because it's got the factory reverse shackle on it. You can see right here that someone has covered up the hole that would have been the factory blackout light. And you can see on the side of the Jeep that it's got a filled hole that would have been for that large diameter, big gas tank opening. But somebody has made a custom tank and moved it over to the passenger side, which is really cool. You can also see that it's got this panel right here that's sort of filled in on the cowl. Before I get to under the hood, look at this. If you're a Jeep guy, perhaps you can recognize that this thing is chopped. The windshield has been cut down much lower than stock, and this roll bar is way lower than you would normally have it. And it has these ancient race seats in it that are mounted lower in the Jeep so that your head doesn't stick out up above the roll bar. And look at the steering wheel on that baby. Is that a Lucara? It might be. It's really good. Custom dash with custom gauges. Also pretty short. This thing also has the Warn overdrive in it. Man, it's cool. But wait till you see what's under the hood. You ready for this? Uh-oh. Dual carburetors. And when we look under here, we find a fiberglass liftoff hood, and right there, wow, this is a Willys Go Devil, which is the 134 cubic inch 4-cylinder that was used all the way back to World War II. Actually, it traces its roots back to a Whippet 4-cylinder, and this one is hopped up. You can see, of course, it's got the 2-carb intake on it, which appears to be homemade. Also, a homemade long tube header, which is great. If you look at the firewall, you can see that it's recessed because the whole drivetrain is set back in this Jeep. It's so good. But the prize of the whole thing is this cylinder head. This is a very rare aluminum Chichua cylinder head. Brian Chichua is a legend in the Jeep world. For a guy as incredible as Brian Chichua, it's kind of hard to find a bunch of photos of him. By 15 years old, he was taking flying classes. Chichua drove a Jeep from California to the Panama Canal when he was in his teens, and in his 20s, he set records at Bonneville and El Mirage, and did some road racing and hill climbs, and also owned his own business. By 1963, he started Brian Chichua's Four-Wheel Drive Center, a Jeep dealership. In 1965, he started the Four-Wheel Drive Grand Prix, which was the first off-road racing spectator sport, and this was even before the Baja 1000 started. But he also raced extensively at the Baja 1000 and 500 and the Mint 400, and also in World Cup rallies that ran across multiple continents. Keep in mind, he was doing all of this while also becoming California's largest Jeep dealership. Check out this deal where he placed his ad right next to a competitor's ad because the other guy was claiming to be the largest, and Chichua was not going to give up that ground. He was also making aftermarket parts, and this is the cover of a Chichua catalog that features the gas class drag racing Jeep CJ6. It was powered by a swapped-in Tornado overhead cam inline 6. The more famous Chichua drag car was the Holy Toledo fiberglass flopper funny car. This thing was absurd, and that name was also used on off-road racing Jeepsters. Now let's bring it back to this catalog page that advertises the Go Devil aluminum head that started this whole talk. And all of this made Chichua a member of the Off-Road Motorsports Hall of Fame, just like Rick Pinway. So now you know. Man, this thing's good. Why did I get rid of it? Well, because I would have done the same thing Rick is doing and just let it sit here. See, and the beauty of this is that I can let it sit at Rick's place and eventually it can become mine again without ever having paid a dime of rent. It's perfect. Wow, I love this Jeep. Very, very unusual. Oh, you know something that crossed my mind just before I started shooting this scene is that all those Chichua Jeeps were yellow. Is there any chance that this thing was a Chichua Jeep? Or maybe built by somebody who knew him? Maybe an employee? Maybe someone who worked at the shop? How cool would that be? And we'll never know. Now filling up $2 a gallon cheaper than California. Right now I'm on Highway 60, which runs from Wickenburg sort of at a diagonal down to Interstate 10. It's kind of the back route other than taking the interstate. And there's a lot of little interesting towns here. This is really where my Roadkill TV show was born, if you think about it. Mike Finnegan and I went to Rick Pinway's house, Rick Pinway where I just was, different house, and we rescued a convertible 66 Buick Special that had been rotting into the backyard for decades. And we got the thing running, and this is the highway that we took in order to hobble that thing home. And I don't know, it was the very early days of revivals, like a rescue and get it running and drive it back home kind of thing. It was actually before Roadkill. This is probably 14 or 15 years ago at this point. It was the pre-Roadkill episode. I've still got some photos from it. It was a good time. It was really good. One thing I remember is Finnegan wanted to take a dirt road off to the side here, and despite how completely destroyed that Buick was, I didn't want to do it because I didn't want to scratch up the paint. The paint was, of course, trashed from sitting forever, but I just thought it would look bad with all sorts of desert pinstriping down the side. Oh well. That Buick I owned for a long time, and I spent a fortune storing it. And I ultimately sold it to Holly, which gave it away in a sweepstakes, and it's changed hands a few times. And last year at the Duct Tape Drags in Tucson, I ran into the guy who had just purchased it. And he was super stoked with it. He loved the thing. He said he remembered it from the pre-Roadkill days, and he was stoked to have it. Meanwhile, I'll keep cruising Highway 60 and show you some of the neat stuff I come across. Signs, cars, all the usual. green out here. They had big rain recently, and it's really made the flowers pop up at the side of the road, and all of the brush is really green. I love it when it rains in the desert. It's awesome. What's your first clue that you're heading due west at the end of the day? You know, I have seen this place dozens of times. I've never stopped before, and wow, it's amazing. Imagine how old that gas station is. Look at the construction. And you know it's a gas station because right there is the base for a pump. And man, look at the lettering right there on the building. We flush radiators. It says something about brake fluid, other stuff. Wow. Once again, it's the type of place where I'm glad I stopped because it might not be here next time. Here's a place where I stop every single time I make this drive. It's pretty much at the end of Highway 60 before you get to Interstate 10. It is near Brenda, Arizona, and it is just a radical old building, and I've watched it deteriorate, absolutely fall apart. But now, this time, someone's cleaned it up. It used to have a porch out front that had fallen all the way down and was just wrecked looking. And right over here on this pad, there was an old Chrysler sitting there absolutely forever. And it's gone. And so they have cleaned the place up. Even in the windows in the front of the building, there used to be stuff like old bottles and goods and just random junk like that. And that's all gone. So, you know, I don't know how I completely feel about this because sometimes I like it to just stay the way it is. Other times I'm glad someone's taking care of it, but I kind of also wish that the artifacts were still there. I don't know. I can't get it just perfect for me, but you know I love these old buildings and I'm hoping somebody's keeping this one from going away. And what would be really neat if they can save the map that's all along the top of the building right here. There is a map that I think is from LA all the way to Wickenburg, shows all the little towns along the way. I remember when it stood up much taller, it was in green paint, it was underneath the overhang, and you could really see it. But that was probably in the mid-90s, and now it's 30 years later, and it's pretty well gone. There you go. Cool place. And now I think that's it for the awesome part of my trip because I'm about to get on I-10 and I don't know, maybe I'll check out, say, Quartzsite or Blythe and see if there's anything cool there. Let's do that. Let's roll. Quartzsite is an interesting town. It's a place for snowbirds. If you come here during the winter, you will find untold thousands of RVs parked all over the desert as far as the eye can see. It's kind of crazy. I've been out here for that. There's a gem and mineral show, rock show, and it's sort of like, I don't know, this swap meet deal. It's a complete vibe. It's actually kind of cool. I've never really explored the place for old stuff, but now I've done that, and man, I found what appears to be an old gas station, maybe a house. Look at it over here. Boom. Let's walk over here and see if there is any evidence of old gas pumps here on the ground. And I don't see any, but wow, this overhang sure looks like it was initially a gas station, doesn't it? If this was a station, perhaps this was the homestead. Maybe they lived here and worked there, or maybe this was a separate store. Who knows? Way cooler than anything I expected to find in Quartzsite. All right, it's getting dark. The sun's just about to dip down behind the mountain, but I am so stoked to be able to see this stuff. I've never explored Quartzsite this deeply, and these places are cool and very old. Neat. I'm dreading the point of the trip where I have to just get on I-10 and cannonball. It's the worst. By the way, I'm in an area here that gets absolutely filled with RVs during the winter. I mean, packed. I am filling up whether I need it or not because gas is $2.79. $2.50 cheaper than home in California. Wow. Oh, and by the way, this is the moment where I have to get on I-10 and just cannonball and have no fun anymore. But there's more to the episode, so hang in there. This pig got me home again. That time, it was about 800 miles. Not bad. This thing has really served me well. Unfortunately, on this trip, you may have even noticed that it has been starting hard, and when it does start, it huffs a little bit of blue smoke, like oil-type smoke. And it's also kind of stinky at idle, which it hasn't been before, and so I'm just going to do a little bit of troubleshooting, meaning pulling the plugs. The spark plugs were brand new when I left, and so they should be able to tell me a pretty good story about what's going on in those cylinders, and I suspect I'm gonna find some wet ones. So let me get after that, and I'll show you what I learn. That one's kind of stoked. All right, let me keep going. Spark plugs are out. Conclusions. Passenger side, 2468, actually really good. All you could ask for an old 350 with 84,000 miles on it. Driver's side, 1357, not as good. There was just a fog of oil on every single plug, but the worst offender was number 3. It's got quite a bit of crud building up, so that one's probably the offender. I would estimate that this side of the engine either has bad valve guides or more likely just bad valve stem seals. So the question is, what do I do next? What I really want for the C20 is overdrive so that I can cannonball at way lower RPM. I did get 13 mpg on one leg, 11 on others. I think it could be better than that. And it would create less wear and less of this kind of trouble if I had overdrive. You may have noticed this thing has aftermarket air conditioning on it. It doesn't work. So I need to get that fixed. There's some other tinkering I'd like to do. LED headlights, bed mat, everything that it would take to make this old truck an even better daily driver. And if I do that, you will see it on the David Freiburger channel. Meanwhile, check out my merch store. Link is in my description. And share the channel, watch more videos. That's the biggest thing you can do for me is go to my channel right now, pick a video that you haven't seen before or haven't seen in a while and you loved, and rewatch it or watch it. Thank you very much, and I'll see you next time for more road trips, horsepower, history, and fouled spark plugs. It's a real thing. I'm just gonna brake clean these and put them right back in, by the way. Yeah, that's what's gonna happen right now.